know, when talking about relationships, I think we first need to remember that it's a long time since we were completely in touch with ourselves and our natural ways of being. So we have been deeply wounded, we have changed, we have become a different people than we used to be, not just in a progressive, normal way, but in a very extreme and very destructive way because of what we have been through for the last 500 to 1,000 years. So what happens now is that a lot of young people are militantly exposed to a particular culture of romance, of guy meets girl, what should happen, what is the date, what is the first kiss, what is the first intimate moment, what is it to be a parent, how do you relate, what is a quality relationship, all those things. Now, you need to understand that these are not just universal values. These come from a particular place. In this instance, 99% they come from a Western script, which might work for them, but it doesn't work for us. We are not Western people, we are not European people, we are not white people. So we need to relearn our script. And of course, what can I say? As we live within oppression, because we are colonized at this point, we live with coloniality as part of our dominant reality. So of course, love and beauty and niceness can not just exist within a context that is untransformed, meaning that it still draws from the colonial script. So what is African love in the midst of all of this? I think African love now, and I realize that it is different than it was, but African love right now is to militantly have love for our people first. It starts there, before even a love relationship and a so-called romantic relationship can even erupt. It has to start with your love for self and us. If you don't have love for self, if you don't have love for us, I don't know what you're going to do in a relationship with another black person. If you choose to be with somebody from a different race, that's a different topic altogether. But if you really want to love another black person, you need to start with loving yourself and our people. And I think, to me, that is a revolutionary act, because we are taught to hate ourselves. We are taught to despise ourselves, to forget ourselves, to exist on the margin is normal to us. So when you stand up to that and you don't want to agree with that script, that to me is an act of revolution. So for me, African love in the relationship sense then becomes to position who you are looking for, how you start identifying somebody that you like to communicate with and get to know on a deeper level within that context as a people with the history that we have, both ancient and recent, and what we're going to do in the future. You position your relationship and your want for a relationship or your idea of a relationship in relation to that. And that, if you do that, that changes the whole thing of what is romantic, what is nice to do on the first date, what is nice to talk about. So now you don't want to just talk about money and jobs and looks. You don't want to just look at physical looks and compatibility. You want to understand, is this another person who understands the situation we live in as African people right now and is prepared to form and shape a family in which we're going to raise children who will have a strong and solid resistance against the propaganda and the oppressive forces that attack us. If you don't see that in your partner, even I would say on the first date, choose another person. Don't continue that relationship. You see, as a people who have been lost for such a long time, we become very vulnerable to be wanted. It is very nice for us to be wanted. We become very weak to somebody who thinks about us, looks at us, appreciates us, seems to be infatuated by us. But you must understand that infatuation, it's an addictive behavior. Being taken by somebody and being romanticized by somebody is very much an illusion about a fantasy. And I don't think as a people with our history that we should base our relationships on fantasies, on illusions, on things that actually don't last. So for me, we need to teach our young people a deeper script, a deeper grounding for who to look for. And before you look for somebody, you need to look for self. Have you found you? Have you positioned you? Have you taken charge of who you are and what you're going to become? Because only then will you have clear eyes and a clear mind to look for somebody that you can co-create with in your life. So when you become aware of the brokenness that has affected us on so many levels, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the addictive behaviors that are in some of our families, the abuse, the violence. Physical violence, of course, there's a lot of that, but there's also the violence in disregarding each other, disrespecting each other, not seeing each other, not attending to each other, not trying to be there for each other, leaving members of the family to suffer in silence. That to me is violence as well. So when you start to realize these aspects of violence, these aspects of brokenness, and you understand that this forms part of a script or a design that we have become so victimized by, then you now need to think, what are your actions that you gear towards finding solutions? Are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? And a very important part of healing the broken or restoring the African broken family is to make sure that our children should not continue this pattern that has been there for such a long time, for many, many generations. You need to also realize that sometimes the mess that you carry in your head, the confusion, the self-hate, the addictive behaviors are not necessarily just about your life. It's also about what you had inherited, because there are certain problems that have remained unresolved for generations, because your father's father's father and your mother's mother's mother might not have had the language, might not have had the knowledge, might not have had the time, because of all the oppressive experiences they went through, to even consider what does it mean for me to heal. So now you are a young person with so many burdens on your shoulder, most of which you never wished for or did anything to encounter or to bring into existence. They are already with you. So what you can do is to decolonize your mind through understanding self deeper and root out some of the confusion that has been put into your existence by questioning, by standing up, by being critical, by reading, by learning more about yourself, learning more about the people that you represent, and take a decision that I'm not going to carry this brokenness any further. It's going to have to stop with me. After me, there's going to be more solutions. That means that when and this starts way before you are pregnant or and before there is a child actually coming into the world. As a young person, you must start to plan your parenthood now. If you know, and some young people know this, that they are confused about parenthood, but they know they don't want to repeat what their parents did to them. If you know that is something to operate with. So what are you doing to make sure you don't become the same parent? What are you doing to make sure you become a better parent? And that I will want to see the thoughts, the behaviors, the ways you act now if you say you want to become a different parent, which starts way before the child is actually there. So you prepare yourself to be a solution holder for the broken African family through bringing children up in a different, stronger, and decolonial way. Okay. One of the things that happened to us during enslavement and colonialism is that the family was torn apart in ways that we started to distrust each other. If you think about it, I think almost everybody have an experience of how we can be quite nasty in our fight between men and women, African men and women, as young people and as older people. That again is a design. It's something that was done to us because we were ripped apart from each other in ways that the woman would have to do work and was forced to do certain things by our oppressors that I as a man felt very powerless about. And as I was powerless, my woman or my sisters would watch my powerlessness and say, this man can't even help us. This man is not even my source of strength anymore. This man is not somebody that I can rely on anymore because he is also oppressed. So we have lived with this. We have become these entities that don't carry power. And because we have so many unresolved issues around ourselves as men and women, we find it very difficult to come into the same space and solve it together. So we rather position ourselves as enemies. So you will hear sisters say, you see, the problem with African men is that, and they will have a long list of what they don't like about African men. And we do the same, and we say that, no, the problem with sisters is this and this and this and this, and what they need to do is this and this and this and this. We have scripts for each other. We dictate what the other side of the gender difference should do. And what we really need to do is to come together and listen. I have learned a lot from women who have tried to bring me into the world that they experience, which is a world that I don't experience. I've never been an African woman, so I cannot just think I know it before I've listened to many African women telling me their stories, what they go through, how they see the world. And similarly, and I think this is important, women must also listen to African men. Many of us don't listen. Men don't listen, women don't listen. Many women believe that they are listening, but they're actually just following preconceived thoughts. Men are different, women are different. So just because you've listened to 2 or 3 and their stories went a certain way doesn't mean that you can apply that in all of us. And this goes for both sides of the gender difference. We need to listen to each other. We need to find ways to communicate. And I would just want us as African people to have these conversations even before we go into the space of being lovers and partners and husbands and wives, because we need to learn. As an African man, I need to understand what African women go through so that when I evaluate myself as a protector and a defender, I can respond to that. Not just as a money machine, not just as somebody who gives money to my family or my woman, but can stand up for values, can stand up for fatherhood, can stand up for a partnership and being a partner in a way that is accurate, that is value-based, and that is relevant to the situation we actually share. And I think this is the point that gets lost of us. This is the point that gets lost with us. It's like as men, we think that women are on a different planet and vice versa. We are actually in the same world. Yes, we are treated slightly different, and there are different stereotypes about us, but the fact is that there are stereotypes about it. The fact is that we are violated. The fact is that we are disrespected. So let me listen to women's experiences. Let me then take a position. What can I do? How can I support women based on what I know? And the same for women. What can they do to support based on what they know about us? You know, I think a lot of, especially young people, are looking at the older generation, especially that generation that stuck through everything, kept being married even if they didn't speak to each other for 5 years. and there was all kinds of name calling and all kinds of strangeness happening in the house, but they kind of stuck together. And a lot of young people are saying that, I don't want a marriage like that. I rather split before it can even get to that level. I don't want to live with a partner that doesn't speak to me. I don't want to live with a partner that calls me names. So I think there's and that to me is a healthy reaction to say that that's not the relationship we want. But is marriage Western? Is polygamy an illusion? I think 2 things. 1, marriage has a very long history within African culture. Way before colonial times. And yes, there are different forms of marriage. There's the one woman, one man. There's the one man and several women. There's the different concept of marriage. But the family structure is based on order. It's based on that you can do something with what you have. That you can look into the future and say that hopefully over the next period, over the next year, we're going to be able to do 1, 2, 3 to keep our family sane and intact and provided for. That means you need to have plans, that means you need to have order, and African marriage is there for that, to have an economic, because it's an economic and social union for longevity, for securing a future, but also to keep a sound economic basis so that you can be instrumental in your community. Next to that, I want to say that what marriage has become to many of us is completely Western. Because we copy what white people do, we copy what Western people do, we copy what Europe has put in place, and we feel great about that. We feel great when the bride can look as a Victorian princess from England from 1800s. We take great pride in men who are dressed up in European cultural attire with their suits and bow ties and all of those things. And we take great pride in it. We think it's so beautiful. We think it's beautiful, the most beautiful ever. We think that, you know, the kiss that is done through a wedding ceremony is so touching, it's so beautiful. But the thing is, we are acting, we are playing roles, we are pretending that we're somebody that we're not. And we need to, if marriage is going to make sense in our lives as African people, we need to at least form the basis of it and understand it, celebrate it, and seal it in ways that represent us. So for instance, in the African sense, marriage is not between a husband and a wife. It's between two families. So it's a bond that brings two families together, and the two families now decide that they're going to be there for each other economically, financially, spiritually, in so many different ways. And when you can see yourself as a part of that, marriage becomes something completely different. For me to shout to my wife, it's not just an act between two individuals. I'm disrespecting her whole clan, her whole family, her mothers, her grandmothers, everyone who did something to make her a great person. I'm disrespecting lineages, I'm disrespecting ancestors, I'm disrespecting spirits. So I should think very carefully before I put any word in my mouth that I cannot really stand for. And the same thing, my wife will have to think many, many times about how she talks to me, how she treats me, how she even criticizes me. Because when she does, she criticizes and speaks to my whole lineage of people, my whole family, my whole ancestors, my whole spiritual world. So when you can position yourself like that, you have a little bit more of humble approach. You are thinking a little bit more about how you treat this other person. So for me, no, marriage in itself is not a Western idea, but the way we enter it, the way we celebrate it, the way we act it. Because very often we act, very often we play. And I'm tired of playing. I want to be real. I want to draw from our script. I want to root myself in our reality, our soul, our history. And similarly is monogamy an illusion? I think part of why having many partners and moving from partner to partner has become a behavior that you see often. And I'm not saying we are the only people, but let's talk about us. We see it often within our communities that that's the reality. To me, I draw that back to our oppressive nature, how we were torn apart, how we were broken, how our trusts were broken, how those who owned us, because we were owned by other people for a very long time, how they used to pit us against each other to force a certain disrespect, a certain disappointment, a certain way of looking down on each other as African men and women. We haven't overcome that. We haven't healed from that. So we keep repeating it. So what men and women learn now is that the one thing I will not do is to trust my partner. The one thing I will not do is to enter a relationship with honesty. The one thing that I will not do is to be open about myself. That's what we learn. And that is that's a terrible recipe for a relationship. That's a terrible way to enter a relationship. So we lie, we pretend, we act, we exaggerate, we try to do things so that the other person should not know that I'm actually lying, that I'm actually having a different understanding of what this is. And I just think that is so sad. I must be able to look my wife to be in the eyes and say, this is who I am. This is what I can do. This is what I don't know. And she should be able to similarly respond to me so that we can start on a place, on a platform of honesty, respect, and treating each other as decent. I mean, we have been so ripped apart. So the last thing I need is for my wife to also be an enemy in my life. The last thing I need is a woman who just shouts at me. The last thing I need is a woman who all she can do is to come down and criticize me. And I think that's the last thing she needs from me as well. So I need to learn respect, and that means I need to respect me first. Yes, there are certain things we did in the past. For instance, polygamous relationships have been with us for a long time for different reasons. But without going too deeply into it, there's also a context that polygamy answers to. For instance, if I as a man have several wives, I'm not just responsible for the 3 or 4 or 5 wives that are in my life. Remember what I just said about in a relationship between 2 people, you have married into a relation with the whole family of that person. Now you can imagine if there's 3 or 5 women in my life, I'm married into 5 sets of ancestors, 5 sets of families, 5 sets of mothers, grandmothers, fathers, grandfathers. That's a lot of responsibility. And what polygamy used to be in our culture was order, was respect, was not choosing this as a man because it suits me, because I can look powerful, because I want other men to admire what I have. That's a very weak aspiration for a relationship and for a marriage. It must be done from a level of strength and humility, humbleness. And what I like to say, many of us today, because of what has happened to us and how broken we have become, struggle just to have a relationship with one woman. Now, let alone having 2 or 3 or 4 women that I say I'm going to be honorable to, honest with, and create order with. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it at all. I'm just saying that if you enter that type of relationship, you need to understand that you need to have a system of order around you. You need your mothers and fathers and grandparents to be there for you, to help you solve conflicts when they arise. And that goes for any relationship, even when it's just one man and one woman. But I'm just saying the more people that become part of a marriage, the more people you also need to support it, the more people you need to guide you into it. And this is very important. You should be guided into marriage. And many of us are not. Many of us start from scratch, starting with something that is, all we know is that it's different from the parent generation. That's not enough. So I think we need to work much harder as a community to position what kind of relationships can we benefit from? What kind of men does Africa and the African community in the world need right now? What kind of women do we need? And from there, we can start to walk towards a more healed and empowered family. You know what? I think it is such a fallacy that sex and sexuality is a hush-hush within African culture, because many of us learn that we shouldn't talk openly about sex, and a lot of young people are frustrated because they feel the one thing that they can definitely not talk with their parents about or elders about is sex and sexuality. And guess what? The dominant message that young people are being militantly exposed to is sex and sexuality. In music culture, in videos, in youth culture, in concerts, everywhere there is an enormous pressure on sex and sexuality. So much that certain young people around the African community, if you, probably today, if you are 15, 16, 17 and you have not had sex, that's questionable, that's strange. And it's accelerating at such a rate that to take responsibility for your own sexuality is almost something that is getting lost. And I think we owe it to our young people to be able to have conversations about our own experiences, even if they were bad, so that young people can also learn from them. It is not fair that young people should sit and just out of the air draw some solutions and some experiments towards how sex and sexuality should be developed. I think it is very important that young people learn how to carry their sexuality, but with also the skill of being patient, the skill of saying no, the skill of saying that I'm gonna wait, the skill of taking responsibility for you, not because you don't want sex. Of course, everybody has an urge to and a curiosity towards sex. But I just think it's important that young people learn skills, how to carry themselves, and that they don't have to bow to pressure. They don't have to sleep with someone just because they are being told that this is the norm to do. They can carry themselves differently. And I think African culture definitely provides for us to look at that. There's a whole script of sexuality also within African culture. And it starts with spirit. It starts with understanding that when you are approaching another person, even before you actually are in the situation of intimacy, you need to have respect for this person. You need to be honest in that moment when you engage. You need to see this as a goddess or a god. If you don't, all sex is going to be is a way to reach a climax and not much more. It's just going to be a moment. And I think sex in the African sense is not about moments. It's about building new realities. It's about building possibilities. It's about going into a higher consciousness of being, not just in the moment, but to use and to draw sexuality into the relationship that becomes part of the building process of empowerment, confidence, of greatness and respect. I think it's very important that when you are young, that you have somebody to mentor you in all kinds of aspects of life. But since we talk about relationships now, it is very important that you seek some guidance and some input from an older couple, a couple that you maybe have seen, they seem to be having something that I would like to emulate. What is that? And I've found that most couples are very open to share their own experience. Now, what do you do if you don't have a couple like that? Well, that's just unfortunate, because I think it is very important to get hands-on life experience from somebody who has lived longer than you. But of course, I think we live in a world of communication. So you can reach out to people that might not live on your street or that you might not be working with. Maybe there is a way that you can get in touch with people through social media, through other ways. Of course, you will be careful who you contact and who you talk to. But I'm just saying that there are different ways you can be innovative about this, how you seek that guidance. I think in addition to that, I think there's a lot of strength that exists within us as African people. And I want young people to know how strong you actually are, the potential that is deep within you, how much you actually can do. You are living in a world that tells you that you cannot, you are weak, you are dysfunctional. No, there's a deeper understanding of yourself that you can attain. So I'm also asking young people, reach deep within yourself, reflect. What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of parent do you want to be? How would you like your parents to talk about you? I think a good instructive example is this. Whether you have a child or not, if you don't have a child, envision that your future child can see you now. If you have a child, imagine that your child follows you wherever you go. Whatever you do, are you doing something that you are comfortable having your child see and observe that you do? If the child came into your room or where you are right now, would you be panicking and saying that, no, I wasn't really doing this and you don't understand, you are missing? Or would you say, oh, this is what I'm doing, let me explain to you. If you're doing things, and I'm not talking about intimate situation with the partner, but everything else, if you are smoking, drinking, behaving in strange ways, you know you wouldn't really like your child to see that. So you need to ask, why am I indulging in behaviors that I'm not proud of? Why am I behaving in a way that I know I would have a problem with my child seeing? I think we should live transparent. We should know that we are role models to the next generation. And that means the way we live now, young people need to be role models from a very early age. You don't have time to get to 35 or 50 to be a role model. You need to be a role model from the time you're a teenager, because the next generation is so desperate for role models that they need to look at you. So unfortunately, there isn't much time to play for young people right now. You need to grow up, take responsibility, and find that actually you walk stronger. Things work better for you when you take that position. So do it.